Hi, first grade. Today we are going to be learning about timelines. Our target says, I can identify the purpose of a timeline. Now, you might be thinking, Miss Lime, what is a timeline? Well, when I look at this word timeline, I see the word time and line. That's because a timeline is very similar to like a number line where you have a whole string of numbers and they go in order. A timeline is a line with events that happen in order. Let me show you an example. This would be a timeline. You see how it is strung along like a line here, and it kind of stops every so often and it tells you about something. Now, this one doesn't have any real information on it, okay? But a timeline tells you important events from the past. Now, that's really important because a timeline is telling you about stuff that has already happened. Okay, so a timeline is going to sit down and say, "Ooh, this happened this time, then this time, then this time," and it's going to go in order. Okay, we want to go in order from the farthest time ago until now. Well, why would we ever need something like that? Well, if you needed to know how, let's say, cars were being built and you wanted to know, oh, here's what it looked like in the very, very long time ago, well, then what was the next car and the next car and the next car until all of a sudden you're here today? So, when would we use a timeline? You can actually use a timeline for a whole bunch of different things. I just listed a few examples here. You could use a timeline to retell a book. We know that books have different events that happen in them. You could set a timeline to tell the important events that happened in the book. It's really, really important to remember. You only need to do the super important parts. You don't have to do every single thing that has happened to be put on a timeline, okay? You could make a timeline about someone's life. You could talk about the important things that happened to them in the order that they happened. You could talk about the events in history, like we talked about some good citizens earlier this year. We could talk about their lives. We could talk about a country becoming its own nation, anything like that, anything important in history. We could also make a timeline of how things have changed. Like I said earlier, with how a car has changed, maybe how a cell phone has changed, or video games, or movies, or anything like that. A timeline shows important events in history in the order that they happened. Well, let's take a look at a couple examples. So here would be a timeline of a car. I notice right here it is a line and I see arrows showing that it could keep going, similar to our number lines. Then I have these little tick marks. Now these little tick marks are showing me the important events. On this timeline, we are measuring time with years. Not every timeline has to be years. It could be days, months, even minutes. It just depends what you are putting on your timeline. Since this one is a timeline of the car, I can see that timeline of the car, that's the title. They're measuring it by years because cars didn't differ day by day or month by month. It really was years. So I can come all the way back here to the beginning. This is the very first tick mark. So this is the first important event about the car. And it tells me in 1769, someone named Nicholas Joseph invented the steam car. So a timeline is using words. This timeline is also using pictures. When I'm reading a timeline, it's very, very important to look. I'm not just going to immediately come straight over here because even though it's right beside it, there is a tick mark down here and it's the next tick mark. Sometimes they might alternate on top of the line and below the line based on how big some of the pictures or the words are. It looks like on this timeline, they had a lot of different pictures that they wanted to include. So they kind of alternated so they would make more space. So if I follow, this happened the longest ago, and I keep coming this way, I can see, oh, now then this car was invented, and this car, and oh, now they have some keys and different things like that, up into, oh, the last thing that they have on their timeline is from 1997. And here is the car from then. Now, we could keep going on this timeline and put cars from 2020 if we wanted to, but this is just the part of the timeline that it has. So these are the events that the person who created this thought were the most important events when looking at a car. Now this timeline is horizontal, or just like that. And this is how we're gonna mostly see a timeline. But I do wanna go ahead and show you a vertical or an up and down timeline, okay? Here is a timeline vertically or up and down about Star Wars. Yeah, I know, I heard some of you were excited about that. So this timeline is showing me where all of the movies go in order, because we know, like Star Wars, it didn't really come out in the order of when it actually happened. So I would use this timeline if I wanted to know, well, when did this happen? And I can come here at the top and say, oh, you know what? The very, very first thing that happened in Star Wars was the Phantom Menace, because that's what it tells me on the timeline. Now I can keep going down my timeline and see, oh, then this happened, and after that it was this one, and then this one, and then this one, and I can follow along. A timeline is important because it helps me know, well, what was really important about this, but it also helps me know, well, this is when they happened. This is how it compares to each other, okay? So we use timelines to tell us when are the important events in history, or when were the important events in history, and how do they relate to each other? What order did they happen? It helps us keep track of when things happened. On Seesaw, your assignment is going to look just like this. It tells you to click on the microphone to record yourself answering these questions. Why are timelines important? Why would we use a timeline? Well, we talked a lot about that. Why are timelines important, and why would we use a timeline? So I want you to record yourself in your own words telling me, why are they important and why would we use them? Make sure you hit that green check mark when you're done.